As you probably know, I stream daily at 11 AM CST at twitch.tv/Zianni. One of the rewards for my viewers during September was picking the next champion guide. Wings of Night won the marble race and chose Ahri, so you can thank him for this guide. Hello and welcome to another beginner's guide. Today we'll be tackling one of the most iconic starter champions for mid lane. That's right, it's Ahri. Ahri gets a lot of disrespect for being simple, but she's actually really fun and great for learning the mechanics of the game. Let's get right into it. To start off, we'll be speedrunning through runes and itemization. Electrocute is the most ideal keystone for a burst mage like Ahri and synergizes nicely with her basic combos. This also makes it easier to one-shot unexpected enemies. Next up, we have the secondary row. Cheap Shot is ideal for relatively easy lanes since it rewards you for trading aggressively. But Taste of Blood is also a great alternative for additional sustain against harder matchups or if you just need extra healing. So it'll basically swap depending on what the matchup is. If you just want to not do anything at all, I'd probably recommend just running Taste of Blood. Otherwise, it would be better to swap depending on matchup. Next up, this one is really just only Eyeball Collection. Eyeball Collection offers additional AP to make our combo stronger while incentivizing fighting. To get stacks for this, you have to actually get champion takedowns, which is kills or assist, but it gives you permanent AP, which makes your next combo even stronger. Finally, we have Relentless Hunter, which is fantastic for getting in range or rotating around the map faster. You start off with a little bit of extra move speed, but every time you get another takedown, it'll give you more permanent out-of-combat move speed. So this lets you get to lane faster, lets you get to fights faster, and it gets you in range to cast your full combo, which is what people don't really expect, is that you have the additional move speed from your E, and you just kind of catch them off guard. There are people who run Ultimate Hunter. This just gives you more uptime on your combo, so if you prefer that, you could do it, but Relentless Hunter is definitely better. Now for secondary runes, there's a few more combinations depending on context. This is kind of what some ideal pages would look like, which is Mana Flow Band and Transcendence. This is just kind of an overall average page. If you're very aggressive and you like winning on Ahri very early, I would probably recommend some combination of Scorch. Absolute Focus and Scorch gives you the highest early game damage, whereas you could also just do Mana Flow Band and Scorch for the additional mana sustain, but also doing DPS. Transcendence is also really fantastic just because it gives you more uptime on your combo, so you could also consider doing Transcendent Scorch. For the average gamer who is playing Ahri, I would probably recommend Mana Flow Band just because it's more consistent. Scorch also does reward you for playing aggressively early game. That's something that I think you should probably take advantage of. In terms of runes, you're going to be running Double Adaptive. There are some scenarios where you might value the attack speed just to wave clear faster. Ahri has one of the longer attack ranges in the game that you can take advantage of, and that just lets you combo your auto Q auto a little bit if you want to. Otherwise, Double Adaptive is ideal. You're going to be running Armor and Mar depending on what your matchup is. Now, with runes out of the way, we'll be moving on to itemization. Itemization is a complex concept for most players, so we'll be keeping this relatively simple. Ahri's a really versatile champion and can actually use a lot of different mythics. I personally enjoy Liandry's on Ahri, but you can make anything work as long as you understand the pro-cons. For more information about mythics, you can watch my video on my channel about picking a mythic based on your champion. But we're going to be starting with starting items here, which is going to be D-Ring and 2 pots. With the nerf to Corrupting Potion, D-Ring is just better on aggressive champions in every conceivable way. You can basically compare the items at your leisure and you'll see that it just outstats the pot entirely. If you do feel like you need additional sustain, on your first recall you will just buy a refillable potion. And then you will just save infinite money. Now the next thing you're going to see here is buy this every single game. Dark Seal has one of the best percentages in the game. It is the best scaling item in the game. It is the best gold efficiency in the game. If you are a good player, and you snowball often, or you're just better than the average player in your rank, Dark Seal will get you a lot of benefits for absolutely nothing. It only costs you 350. It won't delay anything to pad, so it's just purchase Dark Seal every chance you get. Now, the reason why I like Liandry is because you're keeping people in range of your combo through stuns and tibbers, so you can get a lot of damage over time. But you also see that Rocket Belt and Ludens are very popular. Rocket Belt is really good because it gives you another way to gap close on people by dashing in. Now the issue that I have with Hextech Rocket Belt is that you don't have a lot of mana to work with Hextech. And a lot of people who run the Rocket Belt build also max W first for the additional damage and the wave clear. So it kind of just depends on your personal preference and playstyle. You could opt to buy a tier just to mitigate the lack of mana that you have, or you can only farm with Q, and because Q has a 100% mana refund, you can make this work that way as well. Ludens is a very straightforward item, also has magic penetration and gives you mana, gives you move speed upon dealing damage with the echo passive. It's just all around a pretty good item. Just depends on context. If you need magic penetration, Rocket Belt or Ludens are really top notch. Everfrost, this isn't really a ideal item on Annie, I'd say. This is really good against melee champions. You can just infinitely cycle CC and keep them in range of Tibbers, so this is really good against stuff like Sylas, Zed, Qiyana. But against more tankier champions like Sylas, who are bruisers, Liandry's does have a lot of value. Regards to boots, honestly, Lucidity boots are really situational, and not many people know how to actively use them correctly. It does give you a lot of access to additional flashes. It gives you the ability to cycle through skills faster, and if you need the flash cooldown, then you consider doing Lucidity boots, otherwise Sorks is just better. Now, moving on to the second item, we have Shadowflame, Void Staff, Danyas, Rabadons, Rylai's. There's a lot of items you could put at second. For most mages, they will opt for penetration items to increase their damage output, and this would be an ideal time to purchase Shadowflame or Void Staff. 90% of the time you would rather have Shadowflame because it synergizes with your champion identity more, but if you're playing against a bunch of tanks, then Void Staff will outstat Shadowflame at around 65 MR. I do have a video on Shadowflame versus Void Staff that you can watch that will break this down very in-depth if you want to learn more about that. If you are playing against something that is a Zed, a Qiyana, something very bursty like a Fizz, a Syndra, then you can opt to go for a Banshees or Zhonya's second. Zhonya's gives you the ability to play aggressively and look for those stuns without really just killing yourself, so it's a great item. In terms of third item onwards, if you did adhere to the advice of going penetration second, then you'll pick up your Zhonya's so that you can run into the enemy team without worrying about dying or getting engaged done. Otherwise, you can opt for a Rabadon's Death Cap for the raw AP. Void Staff is also an option if you need even more penetration, but if you needed Void Staff third, you would have just built it second anyways. Danya's is statistically just the best item right now to go third. It will be nerfed on the next patch and cost 3,000, but the active is really the reason why you're buying it. Fourth item onwards, if you purchase Zonya's and any other combination, you would just purchase whatever you didn't get. Fourth item onwards, Void Staff becomes a really good purchase because people will have at least built one MR item at that point. Oblivion Orb also comes into play because your teammates aren't good enough to purchase anti-heal, and you might be forced to buy it after your core items. Otherwise, Rabadons would be the most stat-efficient item you could purchase at this point. If you at any point are playing into a champion that is one-shotting you through AP, then you can always consider Banshees as another form of protection. Probably could have put this in at third or fourth, but you can really just purchase this any point second item onwards if you would like to do so. It's really good against stuff like Syndra, Ahri, champions that just want to engage into you and kill you before you can react. Alright friends, welcome to the skill overview. If you are familiar with Annie or new to Annie, it's really important that you watch this section anyways, because most players don't go in-depth about what their skills do, and this causes you to be behind other players in understanding the intricacies of your champion. But the skill max order for Annie is Q, W, and then E, and then of course a point and ult whenever you can. The reason why we max Q first is because it has the lowest cooldown, which means that we are getting the most value out of it. Your E skills on levels, which means that you just get passively increased move speed from existing based on your champion level, not the amount of skill points you have in it. There are players who max W first, and the reason why you would max W first is for the additional wave clear. It also has a higher base damage than Disintegrate, but it's important to understand that this is a longer cooldown, which means it's a little bit harder to use in your average game. But if you have faster wave clear, it makes it a little bit easier to roam around the map because you're instantly shredding waves and then just running around. But the first skill we're going to be going over is Pyromania. Every time she casts a spell, she gets 1 stack, and after 4 stacks, her next spell will stun. This is pretty much the bread and butter of Annie's kit. This stun will scale based on levels, starting at 1.25 seconds at level 1, and capping out at 1.75 seconds at level 11. There's a lot of cool stun mechanics you can pull off with this, and I'll go ahead and show you a few as a visual representation. But if I throw out my Q and W at the same time, whatever skill comes in contact first will apply it. So even if I throw the Q first, because my W is an instant or near instant cast, it'll stun off of my W even though my Q was cast first. Another cool thing is that you can actually activate the stun mid-air, so I can actually throw a Q out, and I'll just go ahead and hit my E button while it's in flight, and it'll still stun. So those are some cool ways that you can use Pyromania, and ways to catch people off guard without them really expecting it. Disintegrate is Annie's Q. This spell is really fantastic because it rewards you for farming. If you last hit a minion with Q, it'll refund the entire mana cost and refund half of the cooldown. This is really fantastic because you can catch people off guard with the really low cooldown that it already has, and you can pretty much just stack Pyromania infinitely until you're always able to threaten a stun. It's also targeted, which makes it incredibly hard to miss, and makes it very, very easy to farm, which is why it's such a great champion for beginners or people who are new to League of Legends. Next is Incinerate, which is her W. This spell is a cone that does AoE damage. There's a lot of cool ways that you can use this. We'll go ahead and show you a few examples. As we spoke about earlier, you can actually use it before your Q lands as a stun, but you can also W flash because this has a 0.25 second cast time, and W will cast wherever you are at the end of the cast time. So even though I start W here, it'll cast from the new location as soon as I land, which is fantastic because you can just fuck people up with that. And it's really important to understand the use between like a targeted CC and an instant casting. So even though Q guarantees that you stun somebody when it lands, there's a travel time, which means that people can dash, they can make you miss your ultimate. But whenever you land an immediate stun, like through Tibbers or through your W, you're not really giving them a chance to dodge with mobility skills like dashes or flash because it's happening instantly. There's no time to prepare for it because it's already happened. Molten Shield is one of my favorite spells on Annie because it's a great source of utility while also being aggressive in nature. So it's a strong shield that does damage back to people that hit you, but it also gives you move speed, and that scales on levels, making it really good for getting in range to engage combat without people really expecting it. You can cast this on yourself, or you can cast it on an ally. Really cool thing about this is that whenever you cast your Molten Shield on yourself, it will also cast it on top of Tibber, so you can use it as a way to speed up Tibbers, and Tibbers can get in range just a little bit faster. Tibbers, our ultimate, is one of the coolest parts of Annie's kit. There's some cool interactions, but it's also just incredibly satisfying to drop a Burning Bear on somebody that slaps them to death. And I'm a bear myself, so I can find the coolness in that. Now, Tibbers has a Flame Aura that passively deals damage to enemies standing nearby every 0.25 seconds. There is also a mechanic called Enrage that will significantly increase Tibbers' DPS that isn't included in the tooltip. So you'll see here that Tibbers becomes enraged when Annie dies, but Tibbers will also become enraged when Tibbers is summoned or when when you activate Pyromania. So I'm going to go ahead and use Tibbers on this right side dummy, and you'll see that all of his autos are sped up. And then when I activate my stun, you'll see his attack range is currently attack speed 0.62. I activate my stun, and then Tibbers once again gets a buffed attack speed for the next 5 attacks. This increases your DPS because Tibbers' damage is based on the skill level. And I think it's just insane that it's not included in the tooltip. But it's really important to understand that when you stun an enemy champion, this will once again activate Tibbers, giving you more DPS. So actually using Tibbers to engage and then stunning after gives you more overall DPS from the increased amount of autos. Enraging will also give Tibbers 100% additional bonus move speed, so that makes him ignore unit collision, attack faster. It's just a really strong buff. Now you'll notice that the attack speed decays over the 5 autos, so it starts at 1.65 and then drops all the way back down after every single auto. But it's still something really important to play around. Okay, we'll be starting off with some basic combos. This is pretty much level 1 through level 2. You have a really long attack range. We're talking one of the longest attack ranges in the game at 625. You can see that this is pretty massive. So typically what you'll do is understand that your Q and auto have basically the same range. You'll auto, you'll Q, you'll auto again, that'll proc electrocute, and then you just disengage or walk away. Now obviously if you have stun, it makes it harder for them to trade back, so it's more ideal to trade when stun is up. But you can also just do this at any given point even without stun because you just do so much damage off of that auto Q auto combo. At level 2, you'd just go ahead and walk up and QW and then auto, and then disengage. Right, as we talked about prior, you can actually stun with your Q midair by activating E after you throw the Q. You can catch people off guard by just go ahead and throw your Q, and then E, and then you can just W auto after that. This is your basic engage on Annie. You're going to have your stun up, you're just going to either E in to get in range, or if you have flash, you'll just flash R, and then you'll W Q. It's important to W first because the cooldown is longer. But it's all good, because Q is targeted as well, so even if they try to dash afterwards, it will follow, whereas W is a little bit harder to land if they flash immediately after the CC, so it just makes more sense to order it in that direction.